so much for inviting me to your party. I can't tell you how exciting it is to be back here among all these fantastic Model United Nations people. Yeah, I was a Model United Nations geek for a really long time, and it's really nice to be back. Back in 1989, I was a recent graduate of Clemson University. I was out working at my first real job, and I was a board member at National Model United Nations in New York. There were a group of us there that realized that there was a gap in the market, that Southern schools and smaller schools were not very well served by the Model United Nations conferences as they then existed. So in our youthful optimism, or just being stupid, Linda Schorsch and Jeff Ricker and I, along with a lot of help from Tim Morris and the rest of the Nationals Board of Directors, got together and we went down to Greenville, South Carolina. We found a hotel that would have us. We found a catchy acronym, SERMON, you gotta love that. We printed out some application forms and we crossed our fingers. How hard could it be? Let's throw a conference. Well, we did, and that first year we had over 100 delegates. It was much better than anybody could hope for, and we really appreciated the help that we got from the Nationals Board of Directors. But they did laugh at us a little bit, especially when we were calling it the first annual Southern Regional Model United Nations. Did anybody really think there was going to be a second one? Well, yeah, we did, and it has come to be, and it has come to be 2 conferences, which is absolutely amazing. I haven't been around to see the growth of this conference. After the first year, I handed off to my Director General, Jeff Ricker, and he took the ball from there. I went to graduate school in London, married a man from Norway, got a job at a Swiss investment bank, and stayed gone for about 10 years. But all during that time, and since then, my experiences at Model United Nations have shaped my life in some pretty amazing ways. I thought a lot about those long hours, staff meetings, and position papers, and committees, and what did I get for it? And the answer is, I actually got a lot. Number one, I got, or actually most everything I got, is a sense of wide open possibility. I think my life is very different because of the time that I spent at Model United Nations than it would have been otherwise. Now, in case you think that I was born to Model UN greatness, I'll tell you a little bit about my first experience. I think I was a freshman or a sophomore when I first heard about Model United Nations. It was an upperclassman that I ran into at the student government building, and she told me that she had started going to this great meeting on Sunday nights. And we all get together, and we each pretend to be a different country. And then we write position papers, and we debate them. Do you want to come? Yeah, I'm a geek, but I'm not that bad. But she persisted, and finally I said I would come, and I went to my first meeting, and then my second meeting, and about a month later, I found myself on a plane going to Boston for the Harvard conference. I was a replacement for a last-minute delegate, for a delegate that had dropped out at the last minute. Now, I know some of you might be coming to your very first Model UN conference, and you're probably a little bit nervous, and you're a little bit worried, and you might think you know what you're doing. Let me tell you, my first conference, I really didn't know what I was doing. I kept a seat warm. I raised a placard around to vote. I didn't really do a whole lot more than that. And I didn't really do a whole lot more than that my second conference either. But eventually I started listening to the speakers, started thinking a little bit about positions, and thought, how hard can this be? A couple of years later, our advisor, Dr. Slan, told us, well, why don't you start looking at the podium positions? You know, think about running for rapporteur. So I took a look at the podium positions, and I saw what the rapporteur did, and I thought, good God, I'm not nearly organized enough to do that. So I'll run for chairman instead. So I became the chairman of a GA committee at Nationals. Why not? All they could do was say no. But they didn't. They took me on board, and I was hooked. I was probably a little power hungry too. But I became a committee director, I became an undersecretary general, I became a board member, and then the group of us went on to found this conference a couple of years later. Now, of course, like all of you, I was attracted to the glamour and the luxury of Model United Nations conferences. You know, the university vans, the crowded hotel rooms. I mean, who doesn't want to do that? But the real reason why I kept coming back was the people. Now, I've kind of had a sheltered life in Charlotte, in Clemson, South Carolina. I hadn't met a whole lot of ambassadors' children or people who had been brought up in 3 or 4 different countries or spoke several different languages at the dinner table. And I couldn't figure out what on earth I would ever have in common with people who had never in their life stepped into a Walmart. But all those long hours of working in committees together, I found that myself and those exotic students from elite universities were not really all that different from me. We became friends, we became supporters of each other. These are the people who encouraged me to apply to graduate school at the London School of Economics instead of a school in Washington, because 1 year, no language requirement, hello, and I realized, oh my God, these people are just as lazy as I am. We kept in touch over the years. These are people who were in my wedding. These are people who are godparents to my children. These are people who were excited to hear that I was coming today and to tell you all hello and to give Dr. Slan and Dr. Combs a hug. But of course, the real question that you all have is, what is Model United Nations going to do for me? Is it going to get me a date? No, wait, is it going to get me a job? I often tell people that the only important thing I learned in high school was typing. And the most important thing I learned in college was public speaking. Now, with Model United Nations, you don't just get public speaking. You learn off the cuff, by the seat of your pants, persuasive speaking, when you hardly know anything about the topic. Let me tell you, that is one of the most important skills you will ever learn in your life. Now, I'm sure you've all heard that the greatest fear of the majority of people in this world are speaking in public. Think about that. People are more afraid of standing in front of this microphone than they are if they're on death. Model United Nations cures you of that very, very quickly. You can't be so afraid anymore once you've stood in front of a hostile Security Council. It all gets easier. Now, when I've been in banking for a few years, I got the opportunity to interview for my dream job. I was working for an international investment bank. They had offices all over the world. And they were looking for somebody to go around to all of those offices and educate members of their staff in a variety of different topics. And I really wanted to do that. Out of the blue, I got the opportunity to interview. I was told I had a day to put together a presentation to give to these bankers to convince them that I was the person that they wanted to go in front of executives and IT people and secretaries and new MBAs and teach them the skills and knowledge that they would need to advance their career. It was a piece of cake. All those years explaining Albania's policy on nuclear non-proliferation, nothing else can even match that. So Model United Nations opened doors for me that I hadn't even imagined were there. For years, I traveled, I played, I lectured, I taught, and somebody paid me a lot of money to do it. So what I have to say to you is to enjoy this weekend. Meet as many different people as you can. See that they're really not much less nervous than you are. Rest assured that the skills that you learn through Model United Nations will serve you well the rest of your life, for your job interviews, for your graduate school seminars, for your used car negotiations, for your first dates. Good luck.